to our new edition of New Age Christianity. New Age Christianity is a new way of understanding the message of Christ that transcends time and space. The message of Christ was not meant to be a religious message. The message of Christ is scientific and represents a mathematical truth. If you want to understand this better, please watch our previous videos. In our last video, we talk about how Christians can scientifically use words, meditation, prayer, positive thinking, and actions to create or transform their reality. How important it is to control your words and your thoughts, since everything that exists did so by the power of words. Please watch our previous videos to see the science behind our words. In today's video, we're going to show you how to transition from Son of Man to Son of God, which is the essence of being a Christian. Now, when we say Son of Man or Son of God, we're not referring to a specific gender. In the same manner, when we say he, him, or his, we're not referring to a specific gender. We're referring to the child of God or the Son of God or the child of God. What does it mean to be a Christian? Being a Christian is making the transition from Son of Man to Son of God. My goal in this video is to help you make this transition, is to help you be born again in the Spirit by presenting the message of Christ in a scientific way. There's no confusion in the message of Christ. The message of Christ cannot be subjected to many interpretations. It is a scientific message. We have many Bible verses we're going to read for this segment. They may not make sense right now at this moment, but I guarantee you they will make sense once you finish watching this video. First is John 3, verse 3. Very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. John 3, verse 5. Very truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. John 6, verse 27 to 29. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other one. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. More verses. Matthew 6, verse 24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate one or love the other, or else he will hold on to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. In some other translation, they use money. Matthew 16, verse 23. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. Matthew 13, verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Matthew 19, verse 24. Again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Like I said before, those verses may not make a lot of sense to you, but I promise you at the end, they will make perfect sense. So from those verses, we see that there are two characteristics. One characteristic for a son of man and another characteristic for a son of God. The Son of Man is born of water, cultivates the self, and is attached to the things of this world. The Son of God is born of water and spirit, cultivate the spirit, and devote himself to the things of the spirit. How do we transition from Son of Man to Son of God? That's the big questions one must ask. Well, there's one answer, one word answer for that question: the ego. What is the ego? We're not talking about the ego in the sense of, in a pejorative way, where they say, you have a big ego, you want to be first at everything, you want to have, like, the nicest thing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the ego in a scientific way. The ego was first formulated in 1923 by Sigmund Freud in his landmark work, The Ego and the Id. Freud divided the human mind into three parts: the superego, the ego, and the id. I prefer the French definition or the French appellation. The French call it le ça, or the it. For Freud, each part plays a specific role in the consciousness of a human being. We are not going to go deep into psychology. I'm not a psychologist. However, we need to understand the role our ego plays in the consciousness of mankind. What is the id? The id, or le ça by the French, or the it, is your primitive desires, your sexual drive, your aggressiveness, your aggressive urges. It's your primal instinct. We can call it your emotional being. What about the superego? The superego is our moral conscience, the established laws, rules, regulations, your culture, your way of life. Because of the inherent natures of the id and the superego, they always clash. They are always in conflict. What about the ego? According to BetterHelp definition, the ego is the part of ourself that can take a step back, evaluate information objectively, and make rational decisions for our best interest. For that reason, we have come to associate the ego with our true identity. So the ego establishes a balance between the id, le ça, and our superego. This is the center of our rational thinking, uh, the idea of self-interest. This is how we learn how the world is, how we make sense of the world. This is the center of our perception of the world, uh, our identity. The ego establishes a balance between our superego and our id. It allows us to obtain satisfaction for our needs and wants in a rational way by avoiding the pain associated with the experience. If you have children, you can see firsthand the construction of the ego. When you start introducing the ego, then you will see that your children start behaving in a different way. Their egos start taking shape. Usually, an individual will continue a behavior when the pleasure outweighs the pain when engaging in that behavior. This perception of pain and pleasure varies from one individual to the next. For example, my 2-year-old son, we started introducing, Paddy. He used to go on himself. We tried different methods. They didn't really work. He knew the concept, but he was enjoying going on himself. So we introduced the superego. We told him, each time you go on yourself, you're going on timeout for 10 minutes. We did that a few times. Then each time he had to go, he decided to say he wants to go potty. then we take him to the party. So you see, his ego came into play and make a rational decision of based on pain and pleasure. Since going on himself, which gives him pleasure, and the super ego, 10 minutes time out, he made a rational decision between the two and chose to say, hey, I need to go party. So you can see for some kids, it could take, for him, it took a couple weeks. For some kids, it could take longer. And, for some kids, the very first time you tell them, then, they will follow. So your ego will vary based on your predisposition as, as a human being. I'm not a psychologist, and I don't intend to go into lots of details about the human psyche. To better understand the ego, you must see it as a social construct. A social construct that we identify ourselves with. For example, our relationships, our interaction with the world, our experiences, whether it's positive or negative, our instilled values, and our perceptions of the world around us create our identity, and we often reduce ourselves to that construct. So our ego varies based on our predisposition, the environment, and our experiences. The ego, as you can see, is nothing but a fiction. When I say I'm Gregory, beside my physical attributes and my predispositions, I am referring to my experiences of the world around me, my perception of this reality, my construction as a social entity. For example, my position in the social ladder, the activities I'm engaging in based on my perceived notion of pleasure and pain associated with these activities. The question to ask now, is that Gregory real? This Gregory is not real because he will be completely different if he was in a different environment and going through a different life experience. The real Gregory is the one that would not change regardless of the environment. This is what we call the true self. Your true self is not the ego. The ego is not real. To make you understand it, your name, your college degree or lack thereof, your position in the society, your experiences, your relationships, your perceptions, and interaction with the world around you is not real. Your ego is a psychological representation of a social construct. It would be completely different if you were born in a different family, a different society, if you are subjected to by different rules and having different experiences and perception of the world. If we should write a mathematical function for the ego, it would look like this. E, the ego, equal the id minus the superego as a factor of the environment. I'm not a mathematician, so do not be too hard on me on this one. Okay, mathematics um, is not my skill, but I think it makes perfect sense to write an equation that look like this. Like I said, the ego is a fiction. It is a function of your natural predisposition and the influence of your environment. Your ego would vary from one environment to the next. How could that be real? If your ego will vary based on the environment, so it's not real. Your real self, your true self, is the one that doesn't change regardless of the environment. which take us to the characteristic of the Son of Man and the Son of God. The Son of Man relies on his ego to make sense of his life, identifies himself with the ego. The ego is in control of all facets of his life. His relationships with the world is based on self-interest and therefore conflictual. He's incapable of grasping things beyond his sphere of experience. He idealizes and embraces social values such as appearance, material possession, self-worth, pleasure, etc. He's constantly judging himself and others. He lives in fear. On the other hand, the Son of God relies on his spirit to make sense of his life, identifies himself with the spirit. The spirit is in control of all facets of his life. His relationship with the world is based on mutual interests and therefore constructive or neutral. He is able to understand things beyond his material existence. He promotes and embraces universal values such as love, life, unity, health, happiness. He doesn't judge and therefore not subjected to the judgment of others. He has no fear. Which brought me to that graphic representation of the Son of Man and the Son of God. As you can see, the Son of Man has an inflated ego. The spirit is there, but the spirit is almost fading away. It's there, but it's not really nourished. As opposed to the Son of God, the spirit is fully nourished, and the Son of God is riding his ego, is in control of his ego. We cannot eliminate the ego since we are living in this world, in the material world, but you can control it and diminishing it. Jesus gave us many examples to have absolute control of our ego. And I'm sure this time you're going to understand this, this passage and have a better view of this passage. John 6, verse 27 to 29. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other one. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. By saying those things, Jesus is empowering you to diminish your ego so you can grow your spirit. Your ego is the center of individuality, of individual possession, is the center of pride and all those things that creates you, that makes you feel an individual. So by doing those things, you are diminishing your ego. You are giving your spirit a chance to be born and to grow. That's why this exercise is important. It's not religious. It's purely scientific. Let's go back to those Bible verses that we read in the beginning and to see if they don't make more sense now. No man can serve two masters. You can like one and hate the other, despise one or like the other. So you cannot serve God and Mammon. So it's either you develop your ego or you develop your spirit. You cannot do both. Matthew 16, verse 23, But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Jesus was talking to Peter, and Peter allowed his ego to take over and was talking to Jesus. And Jesus recognized that Peter was talking with his ego and told him that you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of man. Matthew 13, verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Some of you will watch this video and will be born again in the spirit. Will understand the ego and that you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. You will devote all your life and everything you have to live in the spirit. This chapter is for you. In Matthew 19, verse 24, again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. This chapter doesn't say that you should not have material things. No. This chapter is showing you how difficult it is for somebody who has a lot of material things to be born in the spirit. Because people who have a lot of material possession are very attached to their ego, are very attached to those material possessions. And because of that, it will be very hard for you to be born in the spirit and to allow your spirit to grow. Your ego will take precedence, and it's going to be hard for you to be born again in the spirit. That's what the passage says. It doesn't mean that you cannot have money. It doesn't mean that you cannot have material possession, but it will be hard for you to live in the spirit because of all these material things. In conclusion, you need to identify yourself with the spirit and not your ego. Your ego is nothing but an illusion. You can't eliminate your ego like some spiritual circle is asking you to do, because as you're living in this material world, your ego will still be there. You need your ego to function in this material world. But what you're not supposed to do is to allow your ego to take precedence to your spirit. You can diminish your ego by practicing those recommendations that Jesus gave us and be in control of that ego. If you are aware of the manifestation of the ego, then you can be in control of it. But all these things are not enough. You have to identify your purpose as a spiritual being and work towards the accomplishment of this purpose. You have to become an avatar for your spirit to continue God's creation. You have to love unconditionally by helping to awaken your fellow men, because we are all connected in the spirit. We are all part of God, and we are God. As it says in Mark 8, verse 36, what good it is for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I was able to help you become awakened and be born again in the spirit. I will see you next time. I challenge you to watch this video twice, and I guarantee you that you will be awakened. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.